So welcome to our whole extended NCO family. Welcome to our very first webinar. Now we are of course beyond sad that we're not all on our courses at the moment, and now it's what, 4:30, so you would have all been coming in from recreation and going into your sectional, which you love so much, I know. So I'm really sorry we're not with you. I'm Kath Arlidge. If you don't know me, I'm the Artistic and Educational Director of NCO. And I'm joined today by the very wonderful legend that is Jess Gillam, who is a saxophonist and was our artist in residence on the main orchestra course last summer. So before we get there, hi Jess, sorry.
That's okay.
It's not about me in this webinar. The first bit of housekeeping about how we're going to run the session today. Jess and I are obviously here on the screen. Behind the scenes, we have Kate Chaffee from NCO overseeing things, and we also have Nicole Wilson, who's from Musical Orbit, who's a real tech guru, who's looking after all the tech stuff for us today. So they're hovering in the webinar for us, and other than that, it's all our young musicians from the under 12s, under 13s, and main orchestra who've been invited to join us today. Now it's a really interactive webinar, so it's not just about you watching us talk, it's about you getting involved. And there's two ways you can get involved. The Q&A that I just mentioned, at the bottom of the screen here, if you hover your cursor, you'll see a little Q&A button pop up. If you tap on that, there'll be a little box that you can fill in, and you can write any questions that you'd like me to ask Jess, and I will do my very best to ask them, as many as I can. And the other way that you can get involved is we have a bit of polling going on. So there's going to be some things for you to vote on that are going to pop up sort of randomly through the session. We've hopefully planned some quite fun things, so you'll be able to just put in your votes, and we'll see what you think and feel about various things as we're going. So that's how it's going to play out today. So Jess, tell us about your experience on NCO last summer. What was it like being our artist in residence?
Oh, I had such an amazing time, and seeing how hard everybody was working and how dedicated all of you musicians are it was fantastic. It made me very sad that I wasn't in NCO when I was younger, actually. I came away thinking I wish I'd done that when I was younger. But we played John Williams' Escapades, and I'll never forget Theo playing bass, and the way he played bass, and just the whole atmosphere in that orchestra in that week was really fantastic. So I have very, very fond memories.
Yeah, and for those of you that didn't see the concert, the Escapades, John Williams has a solo for double bass that was played by one of our NCO double basses, Theo, and then also a solo for Vibes that was played by Brett. Yeah. I mean, Brett Dean, he's a composer. It's like I'm getting muddled. Matt Brett, who played the Vibes. And yeah, it was an amazing sort of little trio of soloists, really, wasn't it? It was great to have you joined in as well in surround sound and all sorts of different activities, didn't you, while you were with us?
Yeah, it was great to see everything that goes on outside rehearsing the orchestral music as well. All of the surround sound was amazing, and seeing people's ideas and creativity. And then the sectionals, I went into quite a few sectionals, and the brass sectional was great fun as well. We played Dark Eyes together. Yeah, the whole week was brilliant.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Because Jess was very much one of us, really, weren't you? You were in the mix of everything that we were doing. Brilliant. That's great. So how it's kind of strange times at the moment, Jess. How are you spending your days now we're all in lockdown?
Well, somehow it was very strange for me, because I spend so much of my time traveling and not being in one place. So it's quite strange for me to be in the same house for more than a couple of days. But I set up an online orchestra, a virtual scratch orchestra, which seems to have taken up about 90% of my waking hours, which is really, really brilliant. It's great fun, but it means I'm kind of glued to my computer at the moment. And then I'm also...
Tell us a bit more about the scratch orchestra and how we might get involved.
Yeah, of course. So I wanted to try and find a way where we could still make music together, because for me, music is all about being together and sharing with people and uniting, and that sense of community and togetherness, which is what's really present in NCO, definitely. And obviously in these times we can't communicate in the same way and be together in the same way. And it was my dream to have it so that the whole orchestra could play live together, but the technology isn't quite there. There are quite a lot of lags, and even if it's just a couple of seconds, that means the music's out. So to join the orchestra, all you have to do is download the part from my website and then send in a video. I think we've had a few from some NCO people, because I've recognised a few faces from the courses seeing the videos. But you send in the video, and the deadline is on Friday, and then we string all the videos together and I play along live.
So how many players do you think you're going to end up with in this amazing performance?
Well, I can see how many people have downloaded the track on my website, and so far about 3,800 people have downloaded it. So my computer it's not having the best time at the moment. It's just crashing all the time.
That is massive. Oh, well, I can't wait to see. So if anybody wants to join in with that, just download it, send the recordings over to Jess, and you might see your name in lights at the end of the week. Well, when is it actually going to come out?
Hopefully a week on Friday, the 17th.
Friday. We'll think of you next week. It's a good job we didn't have the webinar next week. Great. So we were wondering if you've been practicing, you guys out there, what the kind of practicing regime is. So, here's our poll. Can you see what our poll says? Are you practicing? Nope. Not as much as my mother would like. The perfect amount, or more than my neighbour likes. So these, I can see you all voting. It's really exciting to watch this, all jumping around here. Can you see that too, Jess?
I can, but I can't see what people are saying.
Oh, well, I'll tell you the results when everybody's had a vote. But there you go. Tell us whether you're practicing or not. That's brilliant. Great. So we've got our first question. That's coming from Shivani. Hi, Shivani. So glad that you've joined us today. Her question is, what's your favourite thing about music, Jess?
My favourite thing about music? Wow, that's a big question. I think my favourite thing about music is the amount of joy and hope it can bring to people, especially in times like this, but in any time. The amount of weight that music carries, the amount that it can change somebody's life, really genuinely. Not just the musician's life, but also the audience. There are so many people who say, I heard this piece of music at this time in my life and it made me think differently, or it triggered this thought, it triggered this action, and just how important it is in our society for bringing us together. As we were saying before, it's like being part of a huge family, it's a big community that involves not just the players, but the listeners, the audience, the people who make the CDs. It's such a huge family of people. So I think my favorite thing about music is the way that it changes us as humans, I think.
Fantastic, absolutely amazing. Right, I think you've all voted. It looks like loads and loads of people have voted, so I can give you the results now. So are you practicing? Nope, got absolutely no votes, which is very exciting. Not as much as my mother would like, 32%. The perfect amount, 42%, and that is the winner. And more than my neighbour likes, 26%. So you are all practicing the perfect amount. So massive thumbs up to all of you guys out there. That's brilliant. Great, so we have another question that's come in from Alicia. Hi, Alicia, I hope you're doing okay. How do you say so relaxed when you're performing, Jess?
I would say that's probably an illusion. I'm usually not that relaxed. I think I absolutely love performing. For me, that is a huge part of what music is about. It's that moment of sharing and being able to connect with an audience. And I get very, very nervous sometimes, and I get nervous for every single performance, because it's something that we all put so much time and dedication and thought into preparing, that then sharing that with a room of however many people is quite, it can be very daunting, because it becomes not just about the music, you're there performing it. So I don't always feel relaxed, but I do often enjoy it very much, and the movement and the way I move on stage comes very naturally from enjoying the music.
Do you find there's a difference when you actually get started? Sometimes, sometimes there's like an anticipation, isn't there, a feeling, and then actually when you get going, it kind of flies.
Yes, definitely. The worst moment for me for nerves is the walk from backstage onto the stage. That's my dreaded moment. Because as soon as I start playing, I'm comfortable. It's something that I know very, very well, and something that I've practiced so much, but you don't get to practice walking out in front of an audience the same way that you get to practice being with your instrument and practicing the music. So for me, that moment, like you say, of anticipation and of expectation before walking out is usually what's the most nerve-wracking. When I start playing, I am then kind of transported to somewhere that I know very well from playing all the time.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Great. Thank you, Alicia, for that question. So we've got another question coming. Oh, another poll coming. What is Jess's favourite chocolate bar? Aha. All of them. Lots of people think all of them. Crunchy, Twix, Kit Kat, or Kinder. So let's, I'll just push that to the side there, yeah? And we'll see what you think as that one gets going. Right, Lana Jackson. Hi, Lana. Lovely. So glad that you managed to join us. Your question is next. When you were little, Jess, did you have any other hobbies, or was it just the saxophone that you focused on?
When I was little, well, my mum and dad own a tea room and a shop, cafe and a shop in Ulverston, and I used to work as a waitress for them a lot. So and I used to, we were kind of brought up in the cafe and in the kitchen, so a lot of my time was spent there. And I always like to try and help out with the baking or the cooking and serving in the shop, which is not really a hobby, but I did that. And other than that, I never really found anything that I enjoyed as much as music. And I think that was partially because I really was terrible at everything that I tried. I couldn't draw, I couldn't dance, I couldn't do any of those things, and I just got really frustrated with them. So I just always kept with music.
I did a talk to some musicians recently, and I said, "Why are you musicians?" And they said, "Because we can't do anything else."
It's true.
Yeah. Great. So we've got an answer to, well, we've got a vote on the chocolate bar thing, Jess. So you're going to have to tell us. The Kinder got 10% of the vote. Kit Kat got 15. Twix got 14. Crunchy got 18. And all of them got 44%. So what is the answer, Jess, on the chocolate?
All of them.
All
chocolate I will eat. I've even got some here.
What have you got there?
It's just a piece of a big chocolate bar that my mum sent me in the post.
Oh, that's great. Brilliant. Well done, guys. So you got that absolutely right. There's the results. All of them, 44. Okay. So we've got another question from Kirsten Cook. Do you write your own songs? And if you do, how do you get inspiration to create the songs that you write?
I don't write any music. I used to when I was a bit younger. Never songs, actually. But now I don't really have the time, but I would love to in the future. But my younger sister writes a lot of songs. She was in NCO as well, Patsy, and she writes a lot of songs with guitar and piano. And I know she takes a lot of her inspiration from poetry and books. She wrote a song based on a book by Amnesty International, by the charity, and she also takes inspiration from scenes that she can see, because the place where I was brought up, where she still lives in Cumbria, is very, very beautiful. Lots of amazing scenery and lots of different views, so she takes a lot of inspiration from that. But for me, I don't write, unfortunately.
Maybe any of you guys out there who do write music, maybe you could just send us in the Q&A what you get your inspiration from, and then I can share some of those thoughts back with Kirsten as well. So for those of you who might have joined us a little bit later, if you want to join and ask questions, just at the bottom of the screen here is the Q&A button. Hover over that and you'll be able to ask us some questions. So we've got the next question in from Benjamin Jacobs. Do you give your instrument a name?
No, I've never given them names. I think they do feel like friends, definitely, but I always just call them soprano and alto. Because I think it would feel quite strange if it had a name, because it would almost feel like a person. I think that would feel quite strange. But I wonder if anybody else gives their instruments names.
Well, we did have somebody audition on violas who called his viola Carl and introduced Carl on the audition video, and actually had got Carl Jenkins to sign the back of his viola. So Carl signed Carl. So that was that was a real treat in the little video auditions. It was one of our very youngest people. So yeah, people do name their instruments, it seems.
the most popular name I've heard for an instrument, any instrument, is Benji. I know loads of people who call their instruments Benji.
Benji, well, that's a nice name. Great. So next question is from Neil Crossley. How has life changed since being a finalist in BBC Young Musician?
Life has changed immensely in ways that I could never have imagined. It was such a huge platform and an amazing opportunity that I'll be forever grateful for. And it's just opened so many doors and provided so many different avenues to go down that I could never have expected to have been doing now. So life has changed a lot, but definitely for the better.
Amazing. Can you just tell us a little bit about that whole experience? Because it must have been just an incredible roller coaster.
Yes, it was. So I entered the competition twice. I first entered in 2014 and got to the woodwind final, and then again in 2016 and got to the grand final. And the process was very intense. The competition is, they have an amazing team of people there that really look after you, and it does feel like a very nurturing environment rather than super competitive and intense. But at the same time, it still is a competition, and as musicians we don't train to play our instruments for competitions. We train to play our instruments to share emotion and to connect with people. And competitions are not the same as if we were sports people, because you can't cross the finish line first. Music is so subjective and so personal that it's difficult to put it into a competitive situation. But saying that, I work very well in an environment with deadlines. So for me, I'd finished my exams and I'd done my diploma, and I needed something that had a certain amount of structure and had something that I could work towards and aim for, and it worked really well for me at that point. But I don't think that competitions necessarily work well for everyone. So although I found it an amazing experience, I would never be put off by the fact, if you didn't find it an amazing experience as a musician, I wouldn't be surprised, because it's not made for everybody. But for me, it's probably the most intense 2 years I've had to date of improvement. I cancelled everything in those 2 years between the two competitions and just focused on music and playing and trying to improve. And it's definitely set me in good stead now. I haven't been so focused in those 2 years, but at the same time, it's good not to get too obsessed by something. It's good to be able to take, as musicians, I think it's so easy for us to want to practice permanently, to want to hone our craft and improve all the time, and that's brilliant. But we also have to remember what we're trying to do with the music at the end of the day, and what we need to be able to have learned and take from other areas of inspiration in order to be able to achieve that. So reading can be just as important, walking and being outside, building relationships with people and friends and family, and taking inspiration from all different areas of life so that we can take that into the music, I think is also really important. Great advice.
Brilliant. So our next question up from Claire Marsden: how important is a good warm-up, and how long do you warm up for?
Warming up, I think, is essential. It's not just for you, but also for the instrument, because the instrument's been in its case, having a rest like we have been, and it needs to be woken up and brought to life. And my warm-up, it varies, but I really like playing lots of long notes to warm up, just so that I'm doing the most basic thing with my instrument, hearing the sounds that it's making, feeling the vibrations, and feeling how it all feels in my mouth. As a wind player, everything's happening internally pretty much. So I probably warm up for at least half an hour if I'm having a full session, half an hour, an hour.
Do you play scales?
Not as much anymore, but I still do play scales. They've never been, they are really useful because all pieces are based on scales. they're everywhere, and once you know those patterns, and you know the patterns of the scales, you know the patterns of the arpeggios, You can find them everywhere in pieces. But for me, it was really difficult to make scales feel musical. And once I'd cracked that, once I'd worked out how to play a scale in the same way that I'd played a piece of music, I loved playing scales. And now they're kind of so embedded.
How did you do that? How did you make your scales into music?
I imagine them as songs. So I had different words for them. And I didn't think about, I tried not to think about them as a technical exercise, because it's so easy to sit there and just think, okay, I'm going to play D major and play D major and not actually be super aware of everything you're doing. But I think to imagine that you were playing Mendelssohn concerto, and to have the same level of intensity and the same level of concentration that you would have if you were playing a concerto, whatever it might be, but you're playing a scale, but you're still trying to move someone. And scales aren't the most moving thing. We all know that, but they can feel that way.
Brilliant. So the questions are flooding in. Michael Savage says, if you had to learn another instrument, what would it be?
Oh, I do wish I could sing well, and I'd love to be able to play the guitar, but I'd also like to be able to play the violin.
Oh, good choice, good choice. Lily Owens has asked, what advice would you give to people competing in Young Musician of the Year? You've already given some kind of advice that it's not for everybody, but in a nutshell, is there any advice you could give anybody?
I would say and this applies to, I think, general music as well as being in competitions, general performance, I think be as true to yourself as you possibly can be. So try and create a really clear vision of what you want to do with the pieces that you're playing, and create a real story, a real as clear an idea as possible of what you're trying to say with the music. And yes, of course, take advice from as many people as possible, but always try to stay true to what you really believe, because there's always, I think we have a gut instinct about everything, and quite often I think it can be difficult to hold on to that, because there's so much information that we're bombarded with all the time that it can become a bit of a frenzy in our head of what we actually feel and what we actually think. And one of the most incredible things about music is that everybody is completely different. So two people, equally good musicians, whatever that may be, but two musicians can pick up the same piece and it be a completely different interpretation. And one is not necessarily better than the other. It's just that they're both different ideas. And I think to find what your idea is and to make that as strong as possible and to convey that as strongly as possible is the best thing that you can do. Because then you can never look back and say, oh, I wish I'd done it my way. I wish I'd done that, because you know that at least you've given all of yourself to it.
Yeah, brilliant, great advice, thank you. So Amy Prince, hi. Oh, and another poll, all at the same time. Amy wants to know, what age did you decide to become a proper musician? Does that mean that if you're in NCO, you're not yet a proper musician? I think Amy, and certainly all of you guys that have asked questions, are very proper musicians already, but maybe professional musician, or when did you want it to be your life?
I don't remember ever deciding. It just kind of happened, because I just love it so much and took so much joy from it that I'd never really thought of anything else. It wasn't a kind of split decision where I thought, right, now I'm going to be a musician. There's definitely been moments where I've thought, if I really want to do this, I'm going to have to work hard. But there's never been a moment where I said, this is going to be my career, this is going to be my job. It's just I feel very lucky that it just happened, because I love it so much.
Brilliant. So we've got this poll. It looks like most of you have voted. Can you see that there, Jess, the poll? How well do we know Jess? So does Jess have any hidden talents? Is she a secret skateboarder? Is she a juggler? Is she great at archery? Does she love to bake, or has she nailed the moonwalk? We might be asking you to do a moonwalk. I can tell you, well, maybe Kate will publish the results of that, but it's looking pretty strong at the moment for one of those, but we'll come back to that. Okay, next up, Eleanor Mackenzie Jones has asked, what do you do if you lack motivation?
What do I do if I lack motivation? I think the first thing I often do is, if it's when you're practicing, put the instrument down straight away, because at the moment where you don't feel like you want to be playing and you're not in the right mind space, you're going to set in bad habits. So if the moment that you feel like when you're practicing, put it down, even if it's just for 10 seconds, have a walk around the room, and then come back to it with a fresh mind. But for me, generally, if I lack motivation, I listen to my favorite players. I watch videos of my favorite players. I take a look out of the window. I often find just scenery quite inspiring, but usually it's to listen to players that you really love, and that I always go back to players that inspired me when I was very young, because it sparks that same thing inside me of, this is why I want to do this, and this is why I enjoy this, and this is what I'd like to achieve with this. So I'd say maybe even make a little list of maybe 3 pieces that are your go-to pieces for when you feel that way. And I think the other thing is, I often try and figure out why I feel like that. It might not be anything to do with the instrument. It might not be anything to do with the saxophone. It might be that I fell out with my friend yesterday, so I'm not in the right space. So I would try and solve all the problems that I think might be making me feel a certain way, and then go back to the instrument without trying not to take those problems with me. So usually it's speaking, maybe writing your thoughts down, or it might be the opposite. It might be writing down the things that you would like to do and then thinking about why you don't feel like doing them.
Very good, very sound advice. Okay, next question. When you were a child, what was your favourite piece to play?
Well, when I was very young, when I first started playing, my favourite piece to play was Hey Jude by the Beatles. I had a Beatles saxophone songbook, and it was my favourite thing to play. I just used to play Beatles tunes all day long.
That's great. So I think we've definitely got an answer on that. How well do we know Jess poll? What is her hidden talent? And I can tell you from what people have voted for, not very many people think you're good at archery, or think you're a good juggler, or a secret skateboarder. A few more think you might be able to do the moonwalk, which I think is quite a good thumbs up. But the massive majority think you're good at baking. So what do you want to give us the answer?
Yes, I do love baking. I'm terrible at the moonwalk. I'm not even going to try, but yeah, I do love baking.
So do you have any favourite things to bake? Do you have any recipes or?
I really like making biscuits, but probably carrot cake and chocolate cake.
Oh.
If I ever come to NCO again, I'll bring
some time. Cake and a carrot cake and some biscuits for 120 people. Brilliant, thank you. Great. So we have got another question from Camilla. How do you structure your practice?
How do I structure my practice? It varies, because usually I have a number of concerts coming up that I have to learn certain things for by certain times, and there are certain deadlines. But at the moment, I've found myself in such a funny place, because we don't know when the next concerts are going to be, because we're in such a strange situation. So for me, I've had to really take a step back and think about what I'm trying to do, and why I'm practicing, and why I'm playing music at all. So structuring practice is really important. To be honest, at the moment, I'm just playing a lot of Bach to try and improve my technique. The Bach cello suites on saxophone, which sound quite strange, but I think they do work. But I think structure is really quite important in practice for me definitely anyway. I think having a time limit of how much you want to spend on each area of your practice. So I might do a half an hour warm up, say, and then have a list of things that I want to work on for that day, or a list of achievements. And it might be something like 30 minutes on this piece, or it might be I want to be able to play that passage in that piece. So that could take anywhere from 10 minutes to 10 hours. You never know how long something's going to take. But I think to have a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve in a practice session, so that you're not aimlessly playing, or just which I think sometimes it can be great to just be with the instrument and just to play anything randomly, but I think usually it's good to have a clear idea of what you're trying to do with your practice, what you want to achieve, Are you practicing just because you feel like you should, or are you practicing because you have an idea of what it is you're trying to do? So for me, again, I have it might be here somewhere. This is my practice notebook. So I would write down, here I keep all my notes from my lessons in, but then I also write down notes from my practice. So I would write down from this practice session, this went well, this didn't go well, I'd like to work on this tomorrow. And that, for me, writing down often makes it easier. So you could try that, see if having a list of what you want to work on. You might be able to tell I'm quite a listy person. I like having a clear structure, but that's usually how I would do it. I'd have an idea of what I was going to do, make sure I always do a warm-up, and then work on the things that I've written down.
So in a way, you've planned your next practice session at the end of your last one by making notes on what you've achieved in the last one. So you start where you finished, if you know what I mean. You don't start back where you were.
Yes, yeah, because you can quite often do that, and I think because we're practicing so many different things all the time, you might be working on 3 different pieces for your exam, and your scales, and your orchestral music, and the music for your school band. You might have so much music that it's sometimes difficult to know where to start, which can seem funny, but it can quite often be overwhelming with the amount that you need to practice, and then you don't end up practicing any of it very well at all. So I think choosing what you want to do in that session and working on that is much more useful than trying to work on everything a little bit.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Another question from Clem Bullard. If someone wanted to become a professional musician, would you recommend going to a specialist music college or taking a music degree in a regular one?
As in,
I guess if you go to a specialist music school or go maybe to a university and do a music degree or a different degree.
Again, I think that's different for everyone. For me, I've had quite a funny path through different places. I went to the Junior Royal Northern. I started there when I was 13, I think, and then I had about a year and a half at the senior college at the RNCM, but I didn't really enjoy it so much. So now I've moved down to Guildhall in London, and I'm currently studying here. And I find it quite difficult to fit in going to a college with everything else that's going on. And it's such a personal thing. I think the most important element for me would always be a teacher, because you're going to have the most of your time and the most of your work is going to be working on your instrument with your teacher. So I think follow a teacher rather than a place, and don't think that because this place it's not as prestigious as a conservatoire or any of those kinds of things. I think it's the same thing as before. Follow your gut instinct with a person, and try and build the best relationship with them that you can, because that's, I think, where you'll do most of your learning. It's of course important to feel like you're in the right place and the right environment, but at the end of the day, I think the teacher is probably the most important. So I wouldn't say either or would give you a better or worse education. They're both very, very different, and it's very dependent on the person, I would say.
Excellent. So we've got about another 10 minutes left. So if anybody wants to send in any final questions, any fun questions to end off with, that would be great. Look, there's the results of our poll. 71% of you thought that her secret talent was baking, and you're absolutely right. So that's brilliant. Okay, so, and we've got another question here. How well do you know Jess? Did she have any pets growing up? No, yes, 2 border collies, yes, several hamsters over the years, yes, a parrot called Polly. Well, we'll see what's true about that in a minute. Okay, Eve Ward has asked Jess, what are your favourite players to listen to and why?
My favourite players to listen to and why? One of them is John Coltrane. You can probably see him there on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
And that's because of his utterly unique sound and the technique that just feels so spontaneous and so faultless in a way that it doesn't feel like you're listening to an instrumentalist anymore. It just feels like you're listening to a musician speaking to you. Another of my favourite musicians is David Bowie, again for similar reasons. He's such a creative force and carries such emotion in his voice. My teacher has been a big influence for saxophone, John Hall, and I used to listen to him a lot when I was younger, and I think a lot of his sound inspired a lot of the techniques and a lot of the sounds I use now. Who else do I like listening to? Pee Wee Ellis is another saxophonist I really love. Anthony Thistlethwaite. There are so many. Shabaka Hutchkins is one at the moment. He's a bass clarinetist and saxophonist, and again he's this kind of force of sound and character. I think that's what I really look for in a player is character, and somebody whose sound hits you straight away and it moves you and you know that they have something to say. And there was someone else I was just about to mention, Donnie McCaslin, who's an American saxophonist, and he has this, it's a sound that it's a saxophonist, and it feels like he's a singer. It feels as though he's just able to speak to you directly. But I try and listen across a lot of different styles and different genres, classical, jazz, pop, whatever it might be, and try and take inspiration from what I like about those styles and bring them into my playing if I can.
Brilliant. Now we've had a bit of a flurry of things coming in saying, could you, Nathan Agbesi says, can you send him some cake?
Yes.
And somebody else says, could you make a recipe book? Now you're in lockdown, you obviously haven't got anything to do, so we'd like to and a few more people are asking for cake. So, and there we have the result of the poll, which says that 46% of the largest vote was 46% for yes, you had 2 border collies and a cat when you were growing up. Not that you didn't have, only 7% said that they thought you didn't have pets. 27% said yes, several hamsters, and 21% said parrot called Polly. So what is the true answer?
The true answer is 2 border collies and a cat, but the other answer, which I've seen on here, which has reminded me that I actually did have a few hamsters that died really soon after I got them, so I'd actually forgotten about them. So there's technically 2 right answers that I didn't even realise were true.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well done, everybody. There's the results of those. So Jacob Carr has said, have you still got your very first instrument? My first French horn has been turned into a lamp in my bedroom. Oh.
Amazing. I'd like to, I might try that actually. Yeah, I still have my first saxophone. It's at my mum and dad's house. And I don't often play it. I don't want to get rid of it for some reason. It has huge sentimental value.
Great. Probably just time for a couple more questions. Do you still take lessons? And if you do, who do you take them with, and how often?
Yes, I still have lessons with John Hall, who's been my teacher since I was 16. And the lessons are fairly infrequent, as I'm usually traveling quite a lot, but we've tried to do some online lessons recently. And I think as musicians, we never stop learning, and we can take inspiration and advice and ideas from people until the day we stop playing, because there's never going to be a moment where we can't develop an idea further. We might get to a point where we feel like we can do everything that is completely possible with the instrument technically, but there will be always a different idea to take from somebody else. So I'd like to think that I have different types of teachers almost for the rest of my life, whether that be just the people around me and learning from them, or a specific saxophone teacher. I think the process of learning just never stops. So I think I'll always have some form of teacher.
Great. Now we're coming close to the end, but Antonia Mully, this sounds like quite a heartfelt question here. Do you think children our age should be allowed to choose the music they play, or should their teachers make them play the classic pieces?
That is a difficult question, because usually 99% of the time teachers are much more experienced than the students, so they have a good idea of what would be useful for the student to play. but at the same time, the student has a very strong idea of what they personally like. So I would say a balance of the two would be the best. And I am quite lucky to have had teachers where that's been possible. I would have work set for me that I would have to learn those pieces in order to be able to develop that technique, say. And then at the same time, I would be learning a piece that I had chosen, because that would keep up my love for the music and the enjoyment. So I would say trying to find a balance with your teacher, but also I don't think we ask our teachers the question why enough. So if our teacher has set a piece for us, why do we need to learn that? Why would they like us to play that music? And then they might be able to explain to you, I think that you should play this piece because it's going to do this for you, because it's going to develop that technique. And then you can understand a bit more why they want you to play those pieces. So I think, and that's the same for so for example, if a teacher told me to put my mouth further onto the mouthpiece for the saxophone, my first question would be, why? Why would you like me to do that? And that's not because I'm trying to challenge them or because I don't believe what they're saying is true. It's just because for me to have a full understanding of what they're asking me to do, I think we need to know the reasons behind it. So I think definitely play pieces that you love and that you want to play, but also ask the question to your teacher of why they want you to play that music, and then you might feel completely differently and you might love those pieces.
Brilliant, thank you. So we have a true and false poll in progress at the moment. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it there, Jess?
Oh, yeah.
Jess loves to sing opera in the shower. It looks like we're pretty much there on our results there, and most people are thinking that it's false, that you're a terrible singer, but you like to have a go. True or false, Jess has her own fashion line called Gillam Glitter. 30% think that's true, 70% think that's false. And true or false, Jess wishes she was in NCO, and 93% of people think that's true, and nobody at the moment. Oh no, hang on, I've missed it. I've gone off the bottom. 7% think that's false. So, do you want to give us the answers on those, Jess?
Well, who on earth could think it would be false that I didn't want to be an NCO?
I don't know.
Who doesn't want to be an NCO? No, I definitely would love to be an NCO.
That must be a wrong click of the button, I think.
Unfortunately, Gillam Glitter does not exist, but that might be something for the future, who knows. And Jess loves to sing opera in the shower. True or false? It is false. I am terrible at singing, but I do often give it a go, much to anybody who's listening's dismay.
Brilliant. Well, that's a fantastic way to finish for us, Jess. Just before I say goodbye, though, to everybody out there, let me remind you about the next webinar, which is next week on the 14th of April at 4:30, and we're going to be in the House of the Canon Masons next week. So join us there for a chat with Sheku and his brothers and sisters. And then on the 17th of April, Friday, a week on Friday, we're going to be have another webinar with our wellbeing leads, Sarah Upjohn and Tom Taffender, who are experts in young bodies, young minds, and musicians. So if you want to join us for that, that should be a whole load of fun. I think we're going to send out the link for the Shaker webinar tonight, I think Kate said. So just watch out for your emails and sign up and come and join us again at the next one. So it just leaves me to say a huge thank you to you, Jess. Thank you for being such a wonderful guest on our very first webinar. And such an inspiration to all of us in every possible way, in the way you think, the way you play, the way you are, who you are. You're just an inspiration to us all. So thank you so much, Jess, and we'll see you again very soon at NCO.
Thank you. Bye. Take care, everyone.